Thanks for coming, everyone. We're going to talk about a topic today that's, I think, near and dear and I think timely for most law firms, which is winning recruits on the web. This is really an annual topic for us. Every time around this year, we have some sort of presentation on it to sort of bringing to light best practices in the industry, looking at trends out of industry, and trying to give you something essentially that you can take back to your firm, and whether it's this year or next year, think about new ways and interesting ways of connecting with those recruits. And I think this is an interesting topic for two reasons. One, because it's continuing to be a competitive market for legal talent. And two, because the web itself and the evolution of the web technologies presents new opportunities for firms. When you think about tools like blogs and social networking sites and video. So all of these new technologies and tools allow you to tell your story differently, to connect with individuals differently, and play a key role in how your website or your web strategy evolves as you sort of target these individual recruits. Before I go on, a couple things we're going to talk about today. One, we're going to look at the sort of the insight into the mind of this Generation Y that we're recruiting. And then I'm going to also show you a lot of examples based on the things that are important to that generation. So these law students that we're targeting, they have very strong opinions about certain things that are important to them as part of this process, as part of their career. I'm going to use that as a framework to essentially show you examples both within law firms and outside of law firms as a way to give you ideas and examples of where you can sort of connect with them on those different categories. And we also did a sort of informal survey of about a dozen or so law students ourselves. And you'll see throughout the presentation, I sort of peppered the quotes in to give you an example of the things that they're directly saying to us about their experience and what is important to them. So hopefully that'll be helpful as well to reinforce some of the things that we're talking about. All right? So let's take a quick look at the state of the industry, if you will. It's pretty scary when you actually start to look at the numbers. Students are interviewing with an average of 25 to 30 firms today. And the scarier part about that is when they come out of that process, they all mention that each firm is almost not distinguishable from another. So it's a huge challenge for firms there to distinguish themselves in that process and to become compelling to those individuals. And to make it worse, you're spending more money today than you ever have, $250,000 up to that to recruit a summer associate. And I think there was another study that said something like 660 billable hours on that particular recruit. So think about the time focused on recruits and not billing. To make it worse, 62% of those individuals will leave the firm after 4 years. And if you look at year 5, it's 80-something%. So you spend all this time and money recruiting them, training. Now, they've been billing during that time, but then they walk out the door with all that institutional knowledge. It's pretty scary. And the pool of candidates is actually not growing. But at the same time, every one of your firms are actually adding more attorneys every year and are growing substantially. So there's a big disconnect between the amount of available recruits in the pipeline and the amount that you have spaces for within your firm. It becomes highly competitive. And if you look at this from a business perspective, there's an interesting parallel that from the recruits' point of view, you almost feel like it's a commodity business. They've got choices that are almost indistinguishable. It's the cost of acquiring. So if you think about a recruit as a buyer, the cost of acquiring a buyer is more expensive. The switching costs are low, and the pool of buyers is almost unchanged year over year. So it's really scary. And then if you go to read some of the websites, you can see why it feels like a commodity to them. They can't distinguish one from another. But I think you and I know, and part of the thing that we're all charged with here is telling that story and differentiating. So, it's not a commodity. Each firm is different. It's unique. It has something different to offer. I think there are some commonalities, but I think for firms to really win the hearts and minds of those recruits, you've got to connect with them in a way that differentiates them. I think one way to do that is to think about that particular target audience. You want to think about the tools that they're used to using, the technology or web technologies that they're used to using, and they're familiar with and comfortable with. And you also want to think about the other aspects of their career that are important to them. So we're going to look at both of those things, and we'll use the second as a framework for looking at other sites that are available. So when you look at the technology that is prevalent within Generation Y, 34% of this generation uses websites as a primary source for news. Not just one website. There are multiple websites multiple times a day to collect that news. A quarter of them own a blog, and almost half of them read blogs. So blogs are a significant part of how they collect information, make decisions, and look at the world. 75% of them have a Facebook account, which means their idea of a network or a peer network goes well beyond the walls of the school that they're in, or the neighborhood they live in, or the building they're in, and really becomes virtual, which gives them access to real information, real-time information, and real information. So if someone says something that's not correct, they can go onto this network and figure out, was that right, or was it wrong, or was it valid? And 60% own some type of portable music player and or video device, such as an iPod. So this is a group of individuals that are used to and are equipped to accept and read and get information in various formats and expect to get it in various formats, which is really troubling as a marketer or a recruiting person in a marketing, sort of with a marketing hat on, trying to connect with them, because it becomes very fragmented. And now you've got to have multiple channels to drive that information through to reach out to this audience. So a little bit of context for the tools that they're thinking about. So as we get into this, I'm going to show you some examples from law firms that are using these types of examples, as well as non-law firms. And when you think about their psyche, their mindset, this is a study for what Generation Y wants out of work. But I think there's a number of different studies out there. This, I think, does a good job of summarizing a few of the key points. The first is that they expect challenging work and high levels of responsibility. The second is that they're civic-minded and socially responsible. We've seen a lot of the green bandwagon. A lot of firms are jumping on that, but this is important to these folks. I think there was a study that said 50% of the students would choose a green company over a non-green company if given the choice out of college when they're interviewing. They require training and growth opportunities, even at the expense of dollars. So it's not just about additional pay. It's about constant feedback and reward and recognition, not just once a year, once every 2 years, but throughout the course of the year. They want to see progression. They want that instant gratification. These are folks that grew up with iTunes. They want a CD. They want it right now. They go on, they download it, and they get it. Instant gratification. They're used to that kind of feedback. They value open communication, and they're socially networked. We'll talk a lot about that. And they seek opportunities to express themselves creatively. So these are not individuals that want to do things the way they've been done before. The challenge of the billable hour, this is the crew that's going to continue to challenge that notion and want to make changes for their own good and for their own work-life balance. Okay, so we're going to use each one of those as a category, and we'll look at some examples within them.